New NBA Plus Stuff podcast in the description. Talked about the Utah Jazz and where they should go in the future. And then I talked about King's Dead by J-Rock with Kendrick and Future. And then I talked about the Chloroseptic remix with Eminem and him going nuts on that track. So anyway, Kemba Walker is officially available in a trade, which I applaud the Hornets for coming to that decision because they are a very stuck franchise, committed to a whole lot of money for a team that just isn't that good. Basically, when Kemba Walker's in the game, they're not bad. When he's out of the game, it's a disaster. And even when he is in there, there's not really anybody who can generate that much offense for them. His contract is up after next season. The writing is on the wall, so it makes sense that Charlotte wants to go in this direction. Now, it seems like what Charlotte wants, or not what they want, but what they're willing to give up on top of Kemba is one of their other contracts. So, Nicholas Batum, Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, Marvin Williams. If I was another team, the guy that I would want is Marvin Williams because he's a power forward who can hit threes and he can switch on defense a bit. And that's valuable for today's NBA, no doubt. And Marvin Williams might be one of the best potential throw-ins that I can think of. But of course, MKG is interesting as well because of what he can do defensively, and I would like to believe that MKG slid over to power forward could actually be a pretty okay offensive player. He'd still be a black hole when it comes to spacing, but in terms of like cutting and being a roller to the rim, I think he could be better as a power forward. Kind of like Draymond, although I don't think MKG has Draymond's ball handling ability, but maybe if you just told him to focus on that, it wouldn't be as bad. So anyway, who are some potential teams that could use Kemba Walker, should trade for Kemba, all that stuff? So in the Eastern Conference, the one team that jumps out to me is the Detroit Pistons. They're not the only one I'm going to talk about, but it's them in the East, and then in the West would be the Denver Nuggets. So if we start with the Eastern Conference and we go to those Pistons, I don't love the idea of a team like Detroit, who's currently the 9th seed, trading a first-round pick. But given their situation, where they're a team full of guys who are pretty much all veterans, how else are you going to get better? Because there isn't a single young player on this team that you look at and say, oh yeah, in a couple years that guy's going to be really good. Now, Drummond got a little better this season with his playmaking and using him as a handoff guy at the top of the key, and his free throw shooting has been better. But he's still not that great overall, just because, his defense is still kind of whatever, and, Drummond's got his limitations, but he's been better, definitely. An above-average center, of course. Reggie Jackson is meh. Tobias Harris is good. Bradley's good. They don't really have a real power forward option. If you turned Kemba Walker into the starting point guard of the Pistons, and then Marvin Williams into the starting power forward, or actually, Tobias Harris is typically the starting four, but whatever. It gives you versatility with Harris and Williams. That would help you out a lot, I would say, because Williams can be that shooter that they've always kind of been looking for. Tobias' shooting has improved, but besides that, John Lord's been kind of disappointing with his shooting and all that. And then Williams can help you on defense, of course. Now, how would this move actually occur? Well, if I'm Charlotte, you're going to have to give me Stanley Johnson and a first-round pick. But even then, I'm not really loving the idea of Reggie Jackson. I don't think Jackson really does anything for me if I'm Charlotte. And hell, I don't even think Stanley Johnson does much for me if I'm Charlotte either. So that would really just be, well, I get a first-round pick out of it, so I guess I'll go with it. Now, if the Pistons had some expirings to offer, then I'd be a little more open to it if I was Charlotte. But they're not going to trade Avery Bradley. I have to assume they want to re-sign him, and there's no one else who makes any sort of money on this team who is on an expiring. Boban's on a 2-year deal, so maybe him and Reggie Jackson would... the Hornets would have to really get some crap offers to accept that, I'll just say. But from a personnel standpoint, yeah, the Pistons could definitely use Kemba Walker and Marvin Williams. Now, if it was just Kemba Walker and nobody else, Reggie Jackson in a first straight up, and even then it's like, I mean, Reggie Jackson's on contract until 2020, So, another team is the New York Knicks, which has been a hot topic. The thing with the Knicks is, like, their best player is 22. Their next important player is 19 years old. They're 3.5 games behind the 8th seed in the East, and they're 5 games under 500 overall. Doesn't really scream out a team that should be giving up first-round picks. And the only reason you would do this is if you think that Kemba and Porzingis together could just be lights out. And from an offensive standpoint, the pick and rolls with those two could just be so good that you're just a really, really good and fun team for the next, 3 or 4 years, right? But giving up that first-round pick could come back to hurt you in the long run. You risk Kemba and Porzingis not being as good as you'd think they would be together, which I think it would be good, but does it make you any better than, the Wizards at number 5? Probably not, because the Wizards have a more well-rounded roster, but maybe I'm wrong on that one. I could be. And the other idea for that would be it makes the team as a whole just a little more attractive to potential free agents, but then if you look at the contract situation, if you trade for Kemba, you would probably have to move Enes Kanter, because I have to assume that Charlotte wants to give up Marvin Williams and Kemba Walker, and Kanter is basically the only way you're going to be able to do that. Give up a first-round pick as well, but then you have to get ready to give Kemba a very generous payday after next season. And if you look at 2020, you're already looking at $65 million before you re-sign Porzingis. So it's going to be an expensive team. Now, of course, in 2021, Joakim Noah's contract is off the books at that point. So, some wiggle room, definitely. But it's not like the Knicks are going to have all the luxury in the world in terms of their salary if they were to trade for Kemba Walker. So overall, I would lean towards no with Kemba and the Knicks. I think the instant success could be good, but long term, I think he's a little too old for where this Knicks team is. And I think a first-round pick, if you nail the first-round pick, of course, could end up being better for you than Kemba long term. So those are the two big ones in the East. The only other one that's kind of intriguing is the Orlando Magic, just because a part of me believes that Kemba Walker and Aaron Gordon together could be an instant success. And the Magic, who have been desperate for a guy who can score like Kemba for a while now, if you just plotted him into what they had going on and it was like Kemba, Evan Fournier, potentially Terrence Ross is your 3, maybe Isaac's your 3, maybe Jonathan Simmons is your 3, whoever, Gordon at 4, and then I don't know what your center position is, potentially. But Orlando definitely shouldn't give up any first-round picks. So, if we get to the Western Conference, the Denver Nuggets have been in every single point guard discussion for a while now. They were in the Eric Bledsoe talks. I have to assume that they're going to jump into this. The thing with Denver is I can't find a perfect move, especially if Charlotte wants to include Marvin Williams, because from a salary standpoint, it would pretty much have to be Kenneth Faried and Wilson Chandler and a first-round pick to make the money work. Would Charlotte be willing to accept Trey Lyles and that being enough? The Hornets should definitely take Trey Lyles if the Nuggets were willing to offer him in a move like this. I don't know, a first-round pick, Lyles, who's been knocking down threes as a power forward. Maybe you throw Malik Beasley in there as well. Basically, Faried and Chandler would make the money work, and then Lyles and Beasley would be the actual guys to be excited about. Potentially. That's something. Denver has all of their first-round picks moving forward, so that's an idea. And I think that one would give you the most in terms of actual young dudes, which I assume Charlotte would want. But then we gotta ask, would that really be worth it for Denver? Well, having Kemba, Gary Harris, Jokic, all those guys together, that's got the potential to be an elite offensive team. Now, defensively, you'd have some fears, but if you can be the third best offensive team in the league, and then you can manage to be like 23rd in defense, you can still be really good. You can sell a lot of tickets. You can go on at least, a second round playoff run, potentially a Western Conference Finals. We would have to see how good Jokic can become, of course. Millsap should help out your defense and all that. It's definitely an idea with Kemba. Now, speaking of Jokic, you're going to be signing him to a very generous contract in 2020. You couple that with re-signing Kemba, you're going to be decently over the cap here, I have to imagine. So, I can see the reasoning not to do it. This would be kind of a jump the gun move a little bit for Denver because they're still pretty young. Like, Jokic is 22, they got a bunch of young dudes. I know Millsap's the one older guy, but, with Jamal Murray and Gary Harris. And it would be possible for you to keep most of your good young guys while getting Kemba, but this is kind of similar to the Knicks where it's like, it might be a little too early. But you also have Millsap, who's 32, so maybe with this, you could become a really good kind of win-now team, and you still have some young dudes. I don't know. It'd be interesting with Denver. Now, there's also the San Antonio Spurs. And if there's any team who can take a 29-year-old scoring point guard and make sure he can play until he's 36, it's going to be Greg Popovich and the Spurs. And the offensive potential between Kemba, Kawhi, and Aldridge could really be something. The Spurs have all their picks. I wouldn't want to give up DeJounte Murray. And I don't think San Antonio would really be in this, but I've seen people talk about them. I mean, the thing here is like, a first-round pick from the Spurs is like one of the worst first-round picks you can get. It's going to be like 28th. The Hornets can find better first-round picks than that for Kemba, so I don't think that happens. I considered the Utah Jazz for a little bit just because they're desperate for offense. I mean, Kemba and Donovan Mitchell together could be something. Rodney Hood's about to become a free agent. Maybe you'd rather have Kemba and Mitchell as your backcourt rather than Donovan and Rodney Hood. Kemba's a better player than Rodney Hood. And Ricky Rubio has proven to be not a very good fit with this Jazz team. I think part of that is because of Mitchell taking the ball out of his hands. If Rubio's in the move and you're willing to give up a first if you're Utah, potentially, but your first round pick this season is probably going to be pretty damn good, seeing as you've had Gobert's injuries and you're probably not going to make the playoffs, so wouldn't really want to give up this year's. If you're confident enough that you can be a good team with Kemba and you could trade your 2019 first, okay, maybe, but at the same time, Mitchell's young and that one could still be a little too ambitious for Utah. Their waiting game might be a little longer than we think. I don't know. Part of that would have to be how confident are you that second-year Donovan Mitchell and 30-year-old Kemba and then 26-year-old Gobert can be really good. I think the big question there is Mitchell, just because it's his second season, as good as he's been as a rookie. Okay, I've gone through a bunch of teams. Ultimately, the Hornets are going to want a first-round pick and at least one young player that they can be excited about. I don't know if they're really going to get that. I think Denver has the most potential because they have guys like Trey Lyles and Malik Beasley and all that, but if you're looking at some of these other teams who I think could really use Kemba Walker, it's not perfect. We'll have to see what happens. I do think they're going to get a decent offer back, though, because like the center market in the NBA sucks. Everybody wants a point guard, who doesn't have one, of course. So we'll just have to see. But I'm done. New NBA Plus Stuff podcast in the description. Talked about the Utah Jazz future. Talked about Donovan Mitchell, by the way, quite a bit. And then talked about King's Dead by J-Rock, Chloroseptic Remix by Eminem. And that's it.